It's time for your daily LSU baseball update with Musso at the box. Now, Matt Musso.
And welcome into another edition of Musso at the box. LSU, of course, their season is a wrap after falling in the Chapel Hill Regional Final. Game number 7, 4-3 to North Carolina in 10 innings. The Tigers wrapped the season 43-23 overall. And for a while, didn't seem like they would get there. But now we enter the postseason, the offseason, and there are plenty of questions and plenty of things to talk about, and that's what we will do here over the next few days on Musso at the box. What I want to do today is give kind of the post-mortem. We went through the game immediately after. We'll set that aside. Now, what went wrong for the 2024 LSU Tigers that led to you with the slow start in SEC play? What went wrong that ultimately landed you in the position where the incredible run that you made was necessary? And how can LSU fix it? And fix it, maybe not the right word. How can LSU build on the corrections that they already put in place to make the run they did at the end of the regular season and into the postseason and carry that over into 2025? So I want to talk a lot about that today. There already have been 2 LSU players enter the transfer portal, so we will touch on that as we go throughout the show as well. So glad you're here with me. Smash the like button. Get subscribed up on the YouTube channel if you have not already. Get subscribed to your favorite podcast app if you have not already. And let's get right into it. The one thing I will do to start this conversation is I do want to reiterate something that we did say immediately after the game, because I think it's the perfect jumping off point to this. When you look at LSU's 2024 season as a whole, it is really a tale of 2 seasons. And you can look at both individually and understand that there is a truth to both of those seasons. And when you put it together, they still both remain true. LSU made a great run at the end of the year. The last month and a half, down the back half of SEC play, into the SEC tournament, into the NCAA tournament, they made a great run. They corrected or started to correct a lot of the things that ailed them early in the year. They came together. All of those things were great. And you salvaged what could have been a really bad year. But you also weren't very good the first half of the year, specifically in SEC play. You started 3-12. You struggled finishing. Your bullpen was a mess. You had Luke Holman in the starting rotation, and then Gage jump, week by week got better. You weren't good enough. You couldn't finish games. You found ways to lose. You had the coach taking away cell phones and talking about leadership in the media. All of those things happened. And it caused you to dig a hole. And without those, you're hosting a regional. Like, you're playing postseason ball. And because that happened, you're left with, yes, this great run and good memories at the end and a great fight from this team, but you're also left with what ifs. It's Jaden Daniels' Heisman season in football. Jaden Daniels was great. The LSU offense was great. You tuned in all the time to see what they would do. They set records, not just at LSU, in the entire landscape of college football. That will be honored and remembered forever. But especially around here, when you bring that up, it's always going to have the caveat of, yeah, but it was wasted because they had a terrible defense. And that's okay. It doesn't make Jaden Daniels' Heisman run, it doesn't make his Heisman season any less special, but it is the giant what if. What if LSU had a great defense? Not even a great defense. What if LSU had a good defense? Well, they're in the college football playoff. Well, there you go. LSU's run at the end of the 2024 season was awesome. And they played really hard, and they played great baseball, and you really got to see what this team was made of and the potential that they did have. But because you didn't finish game number 2 against Florida, or the extra inning game against Arkansas, or Vanderbilt game number 2, because you struggled so much in game 3s this year, you're left with a lot of what ifs and where you could have been. And that's okay. So what led to those struggles? What was the problem? Because we all sit here and we all understand what the standard is at LSU. And we talked about that throughout the season. When LSU was sitting here at 3-9 in conference play after getting run ruled by Vanderbilt and staring Tennessee, a road series to Tennessee, in the face, I sat right here in this room, in this chair, and told you flat out there, that's not acceptable. Like that is in no way an acceptable start. And for LSU to have to go on the run they did, to get in and go on the road in regionals, that's not acceptable. LSU season should never end in a regional, ever. The basement, you should be at least 2 wins away from Omaha in a super regional, every time. You weren't. They know that, and they're going to work hard to get it fixed. But what went wrong? In its most basic answer, what I have for you is you had a core group of guys that you looked at and said, okay, they need to take the next step. Everyone pointed to the sophomore class, but it wasn't just them. You also had returners from a national championship team that you needed to be the leader, that you needed to be the guys that they were in 2023, and a lot of them just weren't. And that put you in a hole. And what it also did was it caused a lot of tinkering, and it took LSU a longer time than normal to establish roles. You had a lot of revolving door for LSU. Everyone's going to point to the lineup, but it wasn't just the lineup. It was also on the pitching staff and in the bullpen. And even in the starting rotation to an extent before you really had that solid 1-2 punch of Jump Holman that carried you on the run. Like, we can talk about the sophomore class. Everyone immediately at the beginning of the year, even at the end of last year, looked at Paxton Kling and said, okay, you're the guy who's going to go replace Dylan Cruz. That didn't go well. It just didn't go well. Paxton Kling hit .222. He played in 61 of the 66 games, but hit .222. He had some really nice moments, but it wasn't consistent enough. But the leash was incredibly long, and I understand why. The tools are there, and you're going to try to let that guy figure it out. He couldn't do it. And in 2 years, he's really struggled with this level of competition. It's not to say he can't get better. It's not to say he can't go somewhere else and get better. But that was a big missing piece for you, and it caused a revolving door at a premium defensive position in center field and a premium spot in your lineup, the leadoff spot. Brady Neal's another one. And Brady had some really, really nice moments. I mean, look back at the regional. Brady was awesome in the regional. But that was a guy you looked at and said, okay, he's healthy now. Take your next step as a sophomore. Grab hold of that starting job. And ultimately, he couldn't do that. Now, he went through another injury, tried to play through it. Much more minor than what was in 2023, but it just wasn't there. Now, I mean, you look up, and it's still a really solid year. Neal hits .276. He's right on the doorstep of 10 homers with 9. But what you saw from him was a lot of production non-conference and not enough in the SEC. Now, you were lucky because you had Alex Milazzo, but that needed to be Brady Neal taking that job and going. When you look at returner, Hayden Travinski in the lineup for LSU every day. I mean, he started 65 of the 66 games. Had 225 at-bats. And early in the year, it was awesome. And Hayden Travinski's a great LSU Tiger. Hayden Travinski is a Louisiana guy who bleeds purple and gold, who didn't have to come back in 2024 and did. Somebody would have given him a contract to play professional baseball, but he came back one more time. And Hayden has had some great moments at LSU, but the truth is he's a streaky player. Your hope for him was that he developed more consistency on a regular basis, and ultimately he didn't. Like, that was a guy you wanted to protect Tommy White all year. Early in the year, worked out great. Late, Hayden really struggled. All of that, I mean, we keep going. Like, there's others that we can go through. Mac Bingham. We talked about this in the preseason when we looked at the transfers. Mac Bingham got off to a nice start in non-conference, but he ends up hitting 251. There's a guy who was like a career 350 hitter or whatnot over at Arizona. Different game. That hurt because LSU, for the first time in Jay Johnson's time, and then we mentioned this in preseason, they didn't go get the big bat in the transfer portal. Now, they tried. I mean, they were in heavily on Braden Montgomery, and it looked like for a time that was going to work and whatnot, and it didn't, whatever. But, Jay's first year, you bring in Jacob Berry. The second year, you bring in Tommy White. You didn't have that big bat out of the transfer portal. And the guy who you kind of looked at and said, okay, well, hell, he hit 360 or whatnot at Arizona, and bring him in. It didn't work. And again, created that revolving door at a premium position in center field. If you're going to look at it from a pitching standpoint, that's much less the sophomore class and much more guys who were contributors on the 2023 team that just didn't take the next step or even be able to do what they did in 23. Thatcher Hurd was incredible in Chapel Hill. He was incredible. But that guy was supposed to be your Friday night starter. It didn't work out. You wanted to see him build off of the end of 2023, and it didn't work out. And that hurt a lot. Like the guy you saw in the Chapel Hill Regional, the guy you saw in the SEC tournament, that's the guy you expected to see all year. And Thatcher Hurd, to his credit, was very forthcoming with his struggles after that game. Very open book, very transparent, and talked about, wanting to succeed so bad that he tinkered and over-tinkered and got himself into a mechanical hole and spent most of the season trying to work out of that. And that is really unfortunate for him and obviously for the team. And I don't want this to sound like I'm calling out specific guys and blaming them for the season, because that, believe me, that is not what this is. I'm using this as the example of you needed these guys. Like, you were looking at this crop to take the next step early, like to fill in these roles early, and it took LSU longer than they anticipated to do that. That's the point of this. Because when you had Thatcher Hurd at the end of the year, once again, he was very good. But if you have that guy at the beginning, how different does this season look? It looks a lot different. Nate Ackenhausen's another one. Nate Ackenhausen's ERA ballooned about a run and a half from 2023 to 2024. Do you realize, like, you talk about bullpen struggles for LSU, when LSU was in the midst of that 3-12 start in conference play, that's when Nate was struggling his most. That's a veteran bullpen arm that you need. Like the Florida series, Nate gave up 3 earned. I mean, you just go through that. That was his biggest struggle of the season. After that, when he became Nate Ackenhausen again, your pitching staff got a lot better. You look at a guy from a transfer portal perspective like Justin Lohr. Man, that hurt. Him struggling to adjust his first year at LSU hurt the back end of your bullpen. That was the conversation we had here all preseason too, was with Lohr and Guidry. Justin Lohr at the back end of that bullpen at Xavier, a team that went to a regional final, eliminated the 6th national seed. Like, he factored into the winning decision 13 times. 13 times. You thought going in with him and Guidry, you could own the 8th and 9th innings. He struggled. He struggled to adjust. And you missed there. And that hurt a lot when you couldn't close games out early. It just, all of that compounded in. And it took you a long time to develop roles. Like, I mean, there were times where, there's a weekend that Gavin Guidry didn't even pitch. That can't happen. There's, you looked at Cade Anderson and said, okay, can he fill one of those roles for you in SEC play? And for the large part of the year, he couldn't, but man, he looked great at the end of the year. So all of that to say, LSU had this group of players that they needed to take the next step from what they had done in 2023 into 2024 and join the likes of Tommy White and guys like that, and Pearson and guys like that you know what you have, and the unknown of those guys outweighed everything else, and they struggled early, and it just took you a while to define your roles. So how do you prevent that? That's a really hard question, because it could be better development from a coaching standpoint. It could be better talent evaluation. It could be all those things. They missed on guys for really the first time out of the transfer portal. Like, Paul Gervais was pretty darn good Jay's first year. So was Eric Raiselman. Jacob Berry didn't stink. Paul Skeens didn't stink. Tommy White was awesome. You missed there for the first time. So that could be some of the talent evaluation. Guys develop at different rates. That's a thing. Did you do everything you could in a timely manner to get them up to speed as quickly as needed? Well, the evidence would say no, but once they figured it out, they looked pretty good. That was the example we gave all year, not all year, but down the back half, right? When it was, okay, LSU has cut their ERA from a pitching standpoint in half down the back end of this season. Like, everyone wanted Nate Yeski's head on a plate. Not even halfway through the man's first year here. And down the back half, you saw actually the development from your pitching staff. You saw them really take the next step. And that ultimately was the catalyst for that run. Where you never really got it consistently enough was offensively. One of the biggest problems for LSU, and it ties back into what we just talked about with that crop not taking the next step, it hampered their ability to play complementary baseball consistently this season. If LSU had a great offensive night, the bullpen lacked. If LSU had a great start, the bullpen was good enough to win. The offense lacked. If LSU had the offense and the bullpen, the errors crept in. There wasn't continuity. There wasn't consistency enough early in this season because of the revolving door, because of guys not settling into their roles, because of LSU not being able to settle in on a lineup or any of that thing, because they quite honestly just didn't know what they had. At least that's how it looks outside looking in. And that's how you end up in the spot that you were, where you need to go make that run. And they did, and it was awesome. But again, LSU making a run at the end of the season, going on the road for postseason and losing in a regional final, finishing 11th in the SEC, that's not acceptable. And it's up to them to fix it. And they'll have a lot of roster turnover. And we will talk about that in a future episode here shortly, as a matter of fact. And it's already started, and we'll get to that momentarily. But for me, that's what went wrong. The guys you were expecting to count on, it took them longer than expected to fill some of those roles, and some of them never did up to the level that you thought they might. And that's where tough conversations comes in with Jay and his staff and those guys, and they'll go through exit meetings here and all of that, and guys will have decisions to make about their future, and they will make those decisions, and LSU will make decisions accordingly. But what's important is that what happened this year doesn't happen. That's their task. And I think you've got the right people in place to do that. I think that's where you draw inspiration from the run that they made, where you say, okay, man, they were 3-12 in the conference. Postseason was a dream at that point. And not only did you get there, you were 2 outs away from advancing and coming back home with a really nice path to Omaha and a deep run in Omaha in front of you. So, yeah, I do have confidence in this staff that they can right the early wrongs of this season and turn in a really great 2025, because they were able to get that sinking ship back above water and actually make something of the 2024 season. That's really impressive. That's an incredible coaching job by Jay Johnson and his staff. And it's a credit to the players for remaining bought in and working to come together and working to play better complementary baseball and getting to that point. That's what it is for me. You can agree, you can disagree. You had this group that you needed to really take the next step and fill big shoes. And it just took longer than expected for that to happen. And it took longer than expected for them to gel and come together. But when they did, they looked pretty darn good. We all thought the pitching was going to be the strength. When it was, they were pretty darn good. When the offense showed flashes down the stretch, this is a really good-looking baseball team. You just have to figure out how to get to that quicker. Talent evaluation, better preparation, better development, all of those things factor into one. It'll be a really interesting offseason. You already have seen 2 LSU players enter the transfer portal. Right-handed pitcher Micah Bucknam announced he was entering the transfer portal on social media today. Not a giant surprise. It was a really up and down 2 years for Micah Bucknam. I will say in 2024, you did see some flashes from him. I mean, the stuff always kind of jumped off the page. There's a fastball that could get up to 94. The slider, when on, was a really tight, hard pitch, but the consistency was just never there. I mean, when you look at his season this year, man, that Northern Illinois outing stands out as first. He went out there and I mean, he was awesome. Struck out forward and walked anybody in 2 innings. That's where you really saw that tight slider. The fastball was up to 95. It was like, oh, wait a minute. Hey, whoa. Is Micah Bucknam going to actually emerge as a weapon for them here? Could that be a secret weapon you didn't know you had? It excited Jay Johnson. He even said this on the record. It excited him so much. He put him out there like 2-3 days later, and it didn't go great. And then they gave him some time off, and they put him back out there. And, okay, it was good again. And then, the role increased a little because they were searching. Like, they were looking for guys to get outs for them on the weekend in conference play, and it didn't go great. So, I mean, ultimately, you look at his career, and it's a guy who had an ERA of 9 in 16 games and 16 innings. So, best of luck to Micah Bucknam. The stuff that he has is good, and it can play, and that guy is definitely good enough to play Division I baseball, and you wish him luck in his next stop. And look, the guy came here, got to win a national championship at LSU. That's awesome. Was a great teammate by all accounts. That's great. And you move forward there, and you'll figure that out in recruiting or in transfer portal or something there. Austin Rolig is the other guy who has officially entered the transfer portal at this point. Shortstop, out of California, and redshirted in 2024. Didn't see any action. Was a highly touted guy out of high school, but that's modern college athletics. Highly touted guy. I mean, you're looking at a a top 40 player in the entire state of California. They produce some pretty damn good baseball players. This guy's in the top 40 of all of them. Was a top 50 shortstop in the entire country. Like, highly touted guy. Gets redshirted his first year. Those guys are going to go look elsewhere. So those are your two right now. Neither really big contributors, and I don't mean that as a slight either. It's just, it is what it is. That's kind of the blunt conversation there. It is what it is. So not guys you counted on a whole lot in 2024 or 23 in Micah Bucknam's case. And you're going to have that attrition, and there's going to be more of those guys from this team as well decide to enter the portal who just didn't see the playing time in 1 year or 2 years or things of that nature, and you'll go for it. So I'm saying you're going to see a good bit of turnover, and we'll get into that more when we do our roster outlook here in a future show coming up. That'll actually probably be the next show. But those are your first two officially in the portal for LSU, Micah Bucknam and Austin Rolick. And LSU is going to get guys out of the portal as well and supplement that way. Jay's done it every year, and this will be no different. You just hope that you hit a little higher success rate maybe than you did in 2024. All right. That's going to wrap it up. That's kind of your post-mortem final thoughts there on the 2024 LSU Tigers. Next time, we will look forward more to 2025 and look at the roster outlook and what possible turnover you might see and things of that nature. So smash the like button, get subscribed up on the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Get subscribed up on your favorite podcast app if you haven't already. And follow me on social media. Be here next time for more on Musso at the Box.